Welcome back to Rich Words Music, where today we're looking at this. It's the vintage Icon V100 MR BK by Vintage Guitars, and this is actually the first relict instrument I've ever had here on the Rich Words Music channel, so yay, big milestone for me. But actually I know this is a controversial topic among guitar players too, and you guys watching this at home will probably get one of two responses from looking at this guitar. You'll either say, yep, that looks great, I'm down with that, or you'll say, horrible, I can't believe that a company's ever done this, I actually don't care what's underneath that finish, I'm out of here, goodbye. But wait just a second, because what I want to do today is go underneath the finish of this guitar, or the two finishes in this case, and speak about the instrument, the book underneath, the cover, if you will. Because this V100 is a Trev Wilkinson designed instrument, so it should be really good value for money, and it should perform really well too, if you can get past the finish, that is. So that's what we're going to do today. I'll tell you about the specifications and the features. We're also going to play the guitar in a bunch of different styles to hear how these Wilkinson humbuckers handle everything from pop to rock and some heavier stuff as well. And at the end, yes, we'll talk a little bit more about the relicking too, because that is a subject that needs to be spoken about. But we'll also talk about how the guitar feels, how it sounds, how it is to play for me, and whether or not I ultimately think it's going to be worth your money at the end of the day. So the vintage V100 MR BK then is part of Vintage's Icon lineup. Now the Icon guitars are the beaten up ones, the road worn ones, the ones that look like they've had a chisel taken to them, that they've been played in smoky bars for years on end. But actually they're brand new instruments, and I don't think that even Vintage would expect you to believe that this was a genuinely old guitar. You can see it here on the camera very easily, and with the naked eye it's totally obvious that this is a brand new instrument. This is not very authentic aging in that way, and I don't think I'm really, making a mockery of Vintage at all for saying that. I don't even believe they're going for that. What I think they're going for is the kind of trend that Fender Custom Shop has had recently, where they've done guitars with two finishes. What I mean by that is you'll see a guitar where it looks like the original finish was, in this case, Sunburst, and the person who owned it had it for a while and decided then that they wanted a black guitar. So they sprayed black over it and carried on playing the instrument, and as they carried on playing sweaty gigs, you can see that where my right arm is there, it started to rub away that second finish, and in this case you have the Sunburst poking through. So that's what this is all about. And again, you'll either love it or you'll hate it, but what I want to do now is talk about the guitar underneath. So we've got a mahogany body and a mahogany neck, as befits this kind of single cut Les Paul type of guitar. Now Vintage, on the specs on their website, don't say if this guitar has a maple cap or not. You would expect that from a V100 style guitar, and many of the other models do, but there's no information anywhere. I've asked at time of filming for clarification on this, and I'll mention it in the comments or in a little text box or something if the guitar has a maple top. We've got that distressed black over Sunburst finish here, and on the front we've got the two Wilkinson humbuckers, a three-way selector switch to move between them, and a volume and tone control for each of the pickups. We've got cream binding on the body, and that moves up to the neck as well. And if you're familiar with Gibson Les Paul necks, you'll be right at home with the neck of this guitar. It's got a slim to medium C-shaped neck. It's a satin finish too. It's very, very comfortable to play. Nothing like a super massive 50s Gibson baseball bat neck. On the front, we have 22 medium jumbo frets and a rosewood fingerboard, which I find really cool. I really like rosewood boards, and you don't often see them on more affordable guitars these days, so well done Vintage for that. And if it's going to be sustainable to see more rosewood on more affordable guitars in future, I'm all for it. Now, the fingerboard radius, so the curvature of the fingerboard, that's 12 inches, so fairly flat, and the scale length is also Gibson approved at 24.75 inches, that's 628 millimeters. Moving up to the nut here, we have a Graphtec Tusk XL nut, which is 43 millimeters across, and having Graphtec hardware on a Vintage guitar does seem like a bit of an upgrade, and I think these guitars have been done up a little bit for 2021, which you'll see in more detail as I move up to the headstock. That traditional now looking Vintage headstock, which if I flip it round, you can see comes stocked with Grover Deluxe tuners. Now normally you'd expect to see Wilkinsons on a guitar like this, I think, but we've got Grover Deluxes on this, so that's a pretty good upgrade for the money. On the back you can also see some of the more aging here on the neck, and the Made in Vietnam sticker, which is distinctively not aged. So this is the Vintage V100 MR BK then. It's Vintage's take on a beaten up, road-worn version of a Les Paul single cut style of guitar, and what we're going to do now is play it and hear how it sounds in a variety of different styles. I'm going to use my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 head today, and we'll start on the Amps Clean channel to play some folk and some pop and maybe a little bit of indie and blues. Then I'll kick in my Gria Lightspeed overdrive pedal. We'll do a bit more indie because I like indie. We'll do some classic rock as well, and after that we'll go across to the amp's lead channel where it's a little bit more high gain. We'll do some heavier rock stuff, we'll do some punk rock and maybe some progressive rock too, and at the very end we'll go back to the clean channel on the amp and I'll engage my Rev G3 distortion pedal, and we'll see how this guitar handles going down to drop D, and if these Wilkinson humbuckers will enable us to do a bit of chuggy metal sort of stuff. So that's what we're going to do today then. Enough talk about this guitar, close your eyes if you will, forget about the finish, and let's hear how the V100MR BK sounds in a bunch of different styles, and we'll speak in more detail about it afterwards. Okay then, so that was the Vintage Icon V100 MRBK, and I hope you enjoyed the playing and the tones, even if you've watched this video with your eyes closed up to this point to avoid looking at that relic finish, and I would understand your opinion if that's how you think. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit more about my feelings on the guitar and my experiences that I've had with it over the past few weeks. So let me start by saying my first impressions out of the box were as follows. I first got it out and I thought, yeah, that finish really is that finish. It is how it looks when you see this guitar online. I actually imagined that all of these guitars would be a little bit different, but they're not. They're exactly the same. This is pretty much kind of a printed finish, and you can feel that this is basically the same layer of guitar there. I'm not actually sure if there would be sunburst under the rest of the instrument, and I'm not in the position to really want to shave the black paint off to try and find out, but I suspect not. I suspect this was designed exactly like that, and this would just be bare wood underneath. If you look at the back of the guitar, you've got bare wood under the black there, and it wouldn't have been like that if it had been a proper sunburst guitar underneath, would it? But that's by the by, really. You know, this relic finish thing is controversial and most people either love it or hate it. But what I would say to people who hate it is, well, just don't buy the guitar. Carry on watching the video because it's a great video, very informative, very funny, haha, very good, but just don't buy the instrument. There's plenty of other guitars by Vintage with very similar specs that you can also go for if this finish is putting you off. And if you do love relics and if you're not that bothered by this, then awesome, go for it. There's a bunch of other different designs that they do. It doesn't have to be black over sunburst. They do kind of relic burst guitars, they do a gold top, the Peter Green style model, they do a JBM, which is kind of related to one of Joe Bonamassa's Les Pauls, for example. There's many options with Vintage. So you choose what you like and you go for it. Me personally, I don't really have anything against relics. I'm not expecting to get anything that looks authentic. And I have to say that as well, even with Gibson guitars that I've seen, even with Fender custom shop guitars that I've seen, pretty much none of them, which weren't genuine old guitars, looked like genuine old guitars. Guitars always seem to age slightly differently to how custom shops age instruments. That's my opinion anyway. And if you also think about it, in 2021, this year, we've had Gibson new Murphy Labs instruments, which cost about $10,000, some of them, and people have been complaining about the aging, the relicking on that. So this really is a topic that will always polarize people. My opinion is, if you like the guitar, go for it. And my first impression was, wow, okay, I don't mind it, carry on. And the rest of my first impressions were, well, it feels good as well. Now this is a Les Paul style of instrument and they're often quite heavy, but this guitar has a pretty good weight to it. So it's solid and chunky, but it's not super heavy. It's 3.62 kilograms, which is a tiny, tiny little bit underneath 8 pounds. So a very good weight. It feels good to play sat down or standing up with the strap as well. So all good there. And I also noticed straight away that we've got some of that 2021 upgraded hardware for Vintage guitars. We've got the Graphtec nut, we've got the Grover Deluxe tuners. We've also got Wilkinson stuff like the Tune-o-matic bridge here, but it seems like this is a slightly upgraded or modded Vintage guitar, and my first impressions therefore were very positive about this instrument. And as I started to play the guitar more, I started to notice more about its build quality and more about its playability too, and I really think that this guitar offers excellent value for money in those respects. In terms of the build quality, we already know about the Grover tuners and the Graphtec tusk nut there, but we've got the Wilkinson humbuckers and we've got the Wilkinson Tune-o-matic bridge there. These are all decent brand names, and of course Wilkinson is an affordable brand, but I really like Wilkinson pickups. They always do a great job for me. Nice classic voicings in most respects, and I'll speak more about the sounds later on, but the humbuckers really did a job for me. In terms of the rest of the build quality then, the neck is absolutely great. You know, the frets have all been done really well. They all seem to have been crowned well. No rough fret ends. The intonation is good. The action is nice, under 1mm. Really slinky and easy to play, combined with that satin neck, so no problems whatsoever in that regard. And of course, if if any gouges had come out of this guitar in shipping, if there'd been any kind of problems, if any paint had chipped off, that wouldn't have been a problem anyway, would it? Because of course the guitar already looks like it's been beaten up to within an inch of its life, but I didn't notice anything wrong. In terms of build quality, setup, this guitar came to me pretty much perfectly out of the box. And of course that aided the playability, along with the neck being really comfortable too. This is an LP style of guitar, of course, and the one other thing that I have to mention is that on the back here we've got a heel joint that gives you better upper fret access than a standard Gibson heel joint would do there as well. So very, very cool indeed. I found the guitar very easy to play, it feels good too, and it just seems like good value for money. And now let's talk about the sounds of the guitar, because of course that is another key component, and this is all driven by these Wilkinson humbuckers here, and Trev Wilkinson knows his stuff. I'm a huge fan, I've worked with Trev for quite a few years now, and I really enjoy his pickups. I recently did the vintage V100 wine red guitar with a set of his mini humbuckers in, and those are absolutely beautiful pickups. Now these full-size humbuckers are slightly different, they're slightly chunkier, slightly woollier, slightly more classic and mellow sounding, but they still give you a great vintage classic Les Paul style of a vibe, and Trev has really wound those pickups to an authentic recipe. And if you want to find out more about Trev and his pickups and his PAF style designs, he has stories about how he worked with people like Seth Lover to get the best possible wine for him. I'm sure you can find those on the web, and maybe I'll link to a story or a video or two where you can see a bit more about that. But in terms of the clean sounds on this guitar, just what you would expect from this style of instrument. Warm, mellow, jazzy tones, bright cleans as well, a bit of top end sparkle. These push my amp a little bit more, of course, than single coils or P90s or the mini humbuckers on the other vintage guitar would, but they just sound really thick. They're really nice sounding classic pickups. I really enjoy them for the middle pickup selector switch setting. Most of all, I could play indie arpeggios on that setting for absolutely ever with a little bit of reverb, I think. When we went up to the crunch sounds, this was just perfect for classic rock. You were straight into AC/DC or airborne territory. It just works for me. It just sounds really good. And I also personally play a lot of indie rock, and these gave me nice thick tones to do that. It sounded fantastic. I really enjoyed them. Once we started pushing up to a little bit more gain, then when we went onto my amp's lead channel, again, I thought that the Wilkinson humbuckers did an amazing job. They just sounded fat and raunchy and punchy, and they did that tone totally authentically. For the hard rock stuff, for the pop punk, for the alternative rock, it just worked. It just sounded great. It sounded thick. It sounded like a proper Les Paul to me. Now, when I went to the Rev G3 and did the metal chuggy stuff, again, these pickups can totally keep up, and Les Paul type guitars are very, very good for playing metal. Of course, if you wanted to be super tight and do super modern, progressive, chuggy stuff and have it ultra tight, you'd probably go for a more modern sounding, higher output, probably active humbucking pickup, but you can totally do the job with the Wilkinson humbuckers in this guitar. So in terms of sounds, it has the versatility of a single-cut mahogany-bodied Les Paul style instrument, and I can't fault it in that regard. Very, very cool. So you might have enjoyed this video. You might have really dug the sounds that I got out of this guitar. You might really have enjoyed hearing about the specifications too and thought, yeah, that's right up my street. But you might not be able to get past this relict finish. And I would totally understand you if that's your point of view. Well, the good news in that regard is there's many other vintage guitars out there. Now, this guitar is one of the vintage V100 instruments. V100 is their model name, their code word, if you will, for the single cutaway mahogany body Les Paul style of instrument. And they make a bunch of different icon relic ones, and also a bunch of different reissued ones which don't have relicing on them, which look sparkly, shiny and new. So go check those out as well. They do them with different pickup configurations. You'll find them with 2 humbuckers, sometimes with 3 humbuckers, sometimes with P90s, with different colors, different finishes and different types of hardware as well. So just check them out and see what works for you. There's many vintage options out there if you're in this kind of ballpark and want something like this that doesn't look exactly like this. There's also, of course, many other single cutaway, double humbucker equipped guitars from many other manufacturers. This is one of the most popular guitar designs of all time, after all, and so there's many, many other options. Of course, the main one around this price point would be Epiphone. They make a bunch of different Les Pauls at the moment. Some of them are more classic leaning, some of them are more modern leaning, so you'll find them with different humbuckers, with different finishes too, and of course, with the authentic Epiphone by Gibson headstock. So if that's important to you, check out Epiphone 2. As I said, there's a bunch of other brands that do this kind of instrument as well. So what I would really recommend you do is, if you're interested in this, go down to your local vintage dealer, check out the competition, check out the vintages, and see what floats your boat. And go for the one that works for you, because there's so many different options to suit so many different tastes. And at the end of the day then, I guess I would have to say that this guitar for me has been a whole lot of fun to play. Now, the relic thing is very important as to whether this guitar will attract you or not, and I have to say that for me, once I got over the initial shock of seeing it in the flesh, I really, really liked it. It's not a problem for me whatsoever, and being a relic guitar, it's also satin, and I really enjoy a satin neck on a guitar, so that worked in its favour for me too. And of course this looks a bit like an old guitar, but it feels like a brand new one, so that's cool too. If you don't like the relicking, there are many other vintage versions of this instrument like I've just said, so you can check those out too. But I really like the Wilkinson humbuckers, and I would say if you are looking for this guitar, have a look out for a 2021 spec'd one, because you'll get a rosewood board over something else like Lignum Rosa. You'll get something like a Graphtec nut as opposed to a more generic plastic nut, and you'll get Grover Deluxe tuners as opposed to maybe Wilkinson's or something else. That seems to be the way vintage is going with these guitars. I've been very, very impressed with this one, and I have to say that when I first started working for Vintage JHS back in 2010, 2011, these guitars are light years ahead of some of the ones I played back in the day. So very, very cool experience for me indeed. I enjoyed this guitar very much, and if you're into this kind of thing, I would have no hesitation in recommending it with 1 or indeed 2 thumbs up. I hope that answers all your questions about the Vintage Icon V100 MRBK, but if you have any more, and if you have any comments about relicking, please leave them down in the comments, and I look forward to any kinds of discussions on there. If you're still with the video, please drop me a like and give me a subscribe too, because that really helps the channel. I've got a lot of similar videos to ones like this where I look at other nicely affordable guitars, where I talk about guitar pedals and amplifiers, and I speak with a lot of cool people from the music instrument industry as well. But that's been it for today's video then. I've been Rich for Rich Words Music, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.